So here's the thing most people don't know about your brain. Our brain has a really hard time trying to figure out what's real and what's imagined. So when we watch a horror movie, for example, our brain, it's really struggling to figure out, like, are we in this horror movie or are we just watching it safely from a screen? So just in case we go into fight or flight mode, it activates our nervous system and sets off all the same alarm bells that we would actually feel if we were in a scary situation. And then we watch the whole horror movie and we finish and we feel stronger at the end of it. And there's a reason for that, because watching a horror movie can be training for the soul. See, our soul is really designed to detect threats and then send something to the nervous system, letting it know, like, all right, do we think this is a threat? Do we think it's not? Are we safe? And if it seems unsafe, it's going to send you into that mode where the heart rate goes up, the skin tingles, the sweat happens, and then you got to decide, what do we do about the threat? So it also knows, it has enough common sense to know what's on the screen isn't necessarily real, but it's still trying to figure it out as it goes. So your brain is learning, like, okay, we can handle hard things. We can handle scary things because we confronted this scary thing that's on the screen and it turned out okay. And actually, it wasn't nearly as scary as it seemed like it was going to be at the start. Also, we're training ourselves to confront evil. And as guys, we're the primary people called to really confront evil in real life. So if we can have some training ground moments, like in a movie, where we choose to put ourselves in front of a screen that shows something evil, it starts to teach our nervous system and our brains that, yeah, it's scary and this thing is evil and we've got what it takes. So in this video, I'm going to show you what's actually going on in your brain and what's really happening on the subconscious level. And we're also going to talk about maybe why scripture says that we're training for something that's even more substantial than what's happening on the movie screen. I'm Trey Tucker, and this is Rugged. I'm a mental health therapist, and we're here to make your 20s and 30s legendary. All right, so let's start with what happens in a psychological and a physiological sense when we watch these movies. So from a psychological sense, the fear hits our brain, and our brain tells our amygdala to activate. It's a stress nerve that runs in the back of the brain down the spine. And that amygdala releases all kinds of chemicals you probably heard about. Adrenaline, cortisol, those things that put us into that stressful response moment, that fight, flight, or freeze moment. And then we also get this huge rush of dopamine. And that huge rush of dopamine is what makes us feel so euphoric. We combine that with the adrenaline and we feel like we're floating sometimes when we're watching, just even when we're sitting down, we're watching one of these horror movies. That's what's going on in our bodies. All of these chemicals are being released from the brain out into the body because, again, when these chemicals physiologically run through our bodies, they put us into a mode where we're supposed to take action. Like, we have these stress hormones running through us. It's really hard to sit still because the chemicals are forcing us to do something, either fight the threat, run away from the threat, or at least hide behind something and freeze in such a tight way that you have to use all those chemicals. And if we leave those chemicals in there, they end up stressing us and using us like a volcano and exploding later. But in the moment, in a horror movie, we get to use those chemicals for fun because we're getting to practice the fear without the danger of it. And psychologists call this benign masochism, where we're purposely enjoying discomfort when we ultimately know it's safe. And that's really why I love horror movies, and I don't watch them as much as I used to, and I'll explain why in a minute. But when I was watching them a ton, it's because I'm an adrenaline junkie. And that benign masochism, it's like riding a roller coaster without having to wait in the lines and all the hot weather and all the sweaty people. It's like we know that we're sitting in a safe spot, but we're purposely letting ourselves be moved around and thrown and flying. It's like we know we're safe, but yet we know we're in something sort of risky, and that's what the horror movie gives us. So a lot of people crave that adrenaline rush from that. And then finally, it's not just your body practicing survival in these cases when you're watching these movies. It's your mind rehearsing the courage, because there is no courage unless you face something that's scary. So all these physiological and psychological underpinnings that are happening here, they're really just forcing us to build confidence, because whenever we face something scary and survive it, we feel like, yeah, I'm good enough. I can do this. And that's confidence. So that when we do something even as insignificant as watching a horror movie, we're doing that in a smaller way. So in real life, we also got to look for ways to confront actual things that are scary, not just on a screen. But another thing is that we feel the confidence to know that our emotions, they don't necessarily have to scare us anymore. Like before I became a therapist, I used to be afraid of my own anxiety. Like when I would have the anxious symptoms, I would think, oh no, oh crap, there they are again. What am I going to do? Like I would really make myself even more anxious because I was feeling anxious. But when we do something like watch a horror movie, we start to experience those emotions and we can ride the wave. And then we realize really that's all emotions are. It's just a wave that we can ride into shore. And yeah, it's going to be unpleasant for a while, but eventually I know that that wave is going to take me right into the shore and I'm going to be safe again. So anytime we can do something that shows us that the emotions are temporary and that they're not in charge, we're going to show ourselves like, wait a minute, emotions are actually something that are meant to help me, even though they're uncomfortable at times. Another thing that goes on with these psychological and physiological changes is that when we have something scary together, when we face it with other people, it bonds us tighter to them. When we're jumping at the same time because we're scared, or we're having some sort of question like who's the bad guy, what's the mystery, like we're connecting emotionally on a deeper level because there's truth to the whole thing. The shared suffering brings a closer bond. And then it all ties together. Like I can face the dark. I can face it alone and I can face it with other people, but the full conclusion is I can do this. So here are 5 factors that make horror movies scary. So first one is uncertainty. The brain hates what it cannot predict. It's always going to try to fill in gaps when there's missing information, because if it feels like it can predict something, it feels like it's going to be safe. When it can't predict something, it throws us into fight or flight mode. So for example, the Blair Witch Project, when they hear that the noises outside their tent and they can't figure out what that is, their brains in the fictional movie and our brains thinking that we're in the movie, we go into overdrive mode. Our amygdala lights up. We start scanning for stuff. Like if you're walking literally in the woods like they were and you hear something in the woods that you can't actually see, your brain's thinking of the worst case scenario of what it could be that's making that noise. So it's always going to say, look, if I can imagine it, maybe I can survive it. But if I don't even know what it is, I can't even imagine it. So I've got to go to worst case scenario just to keep myself safe, to be prepared for what might be. All right, next one, vulnerability. That's the next factor, is when we see ourselves in danger, and through the eyes of the movie characters, we're seeing ourselves in the danger that they're in. So these are things like dark hallways, isolation, silence. And of course, when you think about horror movies and silence, you think about A Quiet Place. So when she's given birth, Emily Blunt has to stay completely silent while those monsters hunt her nearby. And as you watch, your own mirror neurons in your brain start to light up, and you feel her tension that she's feeling in her body, and your heart rate raises and your breathing slows down and you start getting tight. And so you can hide and not make a move, not move a muscle just like she's trying to do. It's like you're doing the same exact thing that she's having to do just to survive, because you're experiencing it right there with her. And that horror, it does make your body rehearse the danger and what your body would have to do if the danger were real. It's a dress rehearsal for that. So when that scene is going on, and especially once you've survived the scene, you get that dopamine rush, you get that relief, and you get that sense of accomplishment. So it's this full body stimulation of like, yeah, I did it. And then next factor is violation of the familiar. This is when something that usually is seen as safe becomes threatening. And so this could be like a child's toy, a family home, a vacation, that kind of thing. So a vacation in a hotel makes you think of The Shining. So when Danny pedals through the hotel and meets the Grady twins, your brain experiences this clash between safety and threat, because you see the bright light, you see the clean carpet, you see a child playing on a toy that's normally just seen as safe and calm, but then all of a sudden blood. And the nervous system, it can't reconcile both of those realities at the same time. So when it doesn't know how to reconcile two different things, it just freezes because it gets overwhelmed. And that's the idea of like, okay, something that used to be seen as safe is now seen as unsafe, and all of a sudden the script gets flipped on you. So those types of scenes are really some of the coolest tricks that Hollywood plays on us to get us to jump scare. Next factor is the things that are familiar are made strange. So when something that is almost human, but not quite is happening in front of us, it makes our nervous system alarm go off. So think of Insidious, one of my favorite horror movies. Like, there's numerous things that happen in this movie that are like, they seem like they're humanish, but they're not quite. So like, your brain expects human faces and sounds and rhythms to behave a certain way, but when they don't, your brain panics. So like, that red-faced demon appears in a conversation that just seems like a normal conversation. All of a sudden, you see a face and you expect a face to look a certain way, but all of a sudden, this face is red and the eyes look evil, and all of a sudden, you get these associations with Satan. So something that seems recognizable gets twisted on you. And then you think of an old woman. A smiling old woman seems safe, calm, warm. Not in this movie. The smiling old woman in his childhood photos looks like that was, anytime she showed up, it lit me up into that mode where I just felt the creeps. And so even that cheerful song, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, like if you just heard that song, if you're just riding in a car, it would just sound like a corny, goofy song from like the 40s. But when they put that corny song into a scary scene, something just, it's this unexpected of, wait a minute, this is not what I expected it to be paired up with. And so now anytime I hear that song or anything like it, it makes my skin crawl. And then finally, we got the moral and spiritual fear. This is the type of fear that deep down we know is actually more likely to happen or more likely to have a deeper lasting impact. So think of probably the two most famous that deal with this category is The Exorcist and Hereditary. So the deeper fear is meaning and all of our world breaking down, not just the physical pain that we fear the most. It's like when our brains watch those two movies, that they get a different reminder. It's not just somebody that might hurt us from the outside. It's there's something psychological and spiritual that we can't even see going on. It's this, when we hear about cults, we get the same kind of creepy feeling, is that there's this unseen realm and power that can somehow manipulate us and get its hooks into us before we even realize it's done that. And so these movies, it makes us tremble on a different level because the threat you can't see coming is the biggest threat there is. And it reminds me of Ephesians 6:12. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the powers, and the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And that's the Bible's way of saying, look, there's an earthly realm going on that we can see, and then there's a spiritual realm happening that we can't see. And if that's a foreign concept to you, think about Wi-Fi. We know Wi-Fi is happening all around us, almost anywhere we go, but we can't actually see it, but we trust that it's happening. And I've seen pictures, and I'll try to put one on the screen here, that when you can imagine the Wi-Fi, you can see the different waves and colors that Wi-Fi actually has going on. If you could have the type of lens to really see it, it would blow your mind to know that it's everywhere. And that's really what spiritual warfare has going on with it as well. All right, so that's what's happening in the scenes and in our brains and nervous system. And now let's take it one step further. Let's take it into the subconscious. So Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, said that we all carry a shadow, parts of ourselves that we stuff down or repress. And these are the dark parts of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge, and we certainly don't want other people to know about, but we know they're in there, and we just keep trying to distract ourselves away from them or push them further and further out of our memory and out of our consciousness. And what a horror movie does is it actually takes our shadow or our dark parts of ourselves, and it puts it up on a screen to where it's less threatening. Because anytime we can see something else, something happening on a screen and that it's happening to somebody else, it makes it a whole lot easier to confront our version of it in ourselves, because we realize, okay, well, I'm not the only one. The shame tells us you're the only one that has this struggle. You're the only one that has any kind of darkness in them. Everybody else has it made and it's fine. So don't you ever let anybody else know that what you've got going on. That's obviously a lie, and that's how shame keeps us trapped. But when we see it happen in a horror movie, we realize, okay, yeah, we all experience one version of darkness or another, and a more exaggerated version of it on a screen gives us the courage to confront probably a far less scary version of it in ourselves. And anytime we can face something scary in ourselves, we reclaim power over that thing. And it's the same idea of like stuff grows in the dark. the dark stuff that we try to keep hidden, it just keeps on having more and more power over us as we keep it in the dark. But as soon as we start bringing it out into the light, it starts to lose some of that power. And that's why opening up and talking things out is so important, because when you put words to it, the power that it used to have over us starts to shrivel. So what's really going on in our brains and bodies when we're watching the horror movies is that we're getting to feel fully alive. And we're feeling fully alive for some of the reasons that we just went through about all the physiological changes that happen. But ultimately, we feel fully alive because it's letting us know that we're practicing for what's really going on around us, not just the fake stuff on the screen. It's reminding us what's truly at stake: life versus death, evil versus good, fear versus faith. These are the battles that we're actually engaging in every day in real life without the help of any movies trying to remind us. And those battles, when we engage in those things, those are the things that make us really feel alive and fulfilled. So a movie can be a great rehearsal for the soul, and it gives you more confidence and more fuel to step out into your real life and engage with those battles that are going on around you. And so ultimately, horror movies, they don't just make your heart race. They're actually waking your soul up to remember and step into that battle that's already going on around you. So earlier, I told you that I don't watch horror movies nearly as much as I used to, and here's why. I realized that I needed my spiritual armor when I went into these movies, because ultimately what's going on is, especially with the movies that have a more of a demonic flavor to them, we're opening a door to that portal into that world that Ephesians 6:12 talks about. And especially we leave ourselves extra vulnerable when all of our body, our integrated body, is thrown into that movie. Our whole brain is thrown in. Our whole emotions are thrown in. Our whole physiological response is thrown in. So we are fully engaged in that movie. And a lot of times, if you think about it, like, where are these ideas for these fictional movies coming from? A lot of times they're coming from things that have happened in real life, or potentially they're coming from somebody's brain that might actually be purposely involved in occult and in demonic types of situations and communities. So the root of these movies a lot of times can, I'm not saying they always do, but they can open a portal into our own lives. And it's the same thing. Like I've had clients that have had Ouija boards in the past, and sometimes Ouija boards are like harmless, but I've talked to so many clients in the past that have not just had strange moments with the board itself, but also they've suffered some long-term consequences of something that happened to them that just started with the Ouija board. So movies can be the same thing. I know when I used to watch them, I did get the adrenaline rush, but I also felt a heaviness for days after the movie itself. And for me, it just became a reminder of like, okay, this type of stuff is real. And while the adrenaline part of it's fun and the training is good for me, I personally chose, I can probably get training in different areas. And so when I've chosen to get more training in real life and stepping into situations that aren't screen-based, it's helped me to put on that spiritual armor and also trust God and watch Him show up in my life and protect me as I'm walking through situations that are more aligned with my actual purpose on the earth. When I'm stepping into a risky or a scary situation in order to help somebody else, then I get to see Him show up with His protection and His safety, and I get to see Him using those gifts and traits that He's put into me. So I still love a horror movie every now and then, but I've just grown in wisdom just for my own decisions and my own purpose. There's no judgment or instruction from me to you on this. So that's just the reason for me. So as we start doing more of these videos together, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what other types of effects you might feel in your own brain and body when you watch a horror movie, and maybe some movie scenes I should have mentioned in terms of examples of why things are scary. But either way, let's keep going together. Let's make it a two-way street. Let's keep being legendary, and I'll see you next time.